This is the Almost Daily Zencast. Hello, and namaste. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. I am your humble host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. Let's get started. Hello and namaste, dear growing audience from around the world. Greetings to all of you listening from Portugal to India, the United States to Portland, Mexico to Germany, France to Brazil, the UK and Malta, and places in between. Namaste. I humbly thank you for tuning in and checking out the show. And a special thanks to whoever's been downloading episodes during my little micro hiatus. Although this was a medium-sized hiatus. Every couple of weeks, every 3 or 5 weeks, I just take most of a week off for various reasons. Mostly, I just need to reset, right? We all need that time to reset, recalibrate, reevaluate. You can't keep bashing your head against the wall 24 hours a day without it causing some damage. So go take care of yourselves every once in a while. Okay, anyways, all opening pleasantries aside, what do we talk about? Wow, crazy. I've been away for a while, and while I have, of course, kept my eye on things developing, it's a crazy trip. Just how hard it is to focus on any given issue, given how much craziness is going on in the world. Where to begin? We could, just throw darts at a list. Let's kick open with a fun fact that keeps coming up ever since the 2020 election. Good morning, Trumptopia. How many Trump supporters have actually bothered to investigate the real matter-of-fact issue of who has, in real life, been caught committing election fraud? They may be mildly, ironically disappointed to find out that in real-life factual terms, and of course, I'm sure they'll have all kinds of counter-arguments about why this is so, but here's the simple fact of the matter. Since the 2020 election, there have been some cases of identified election fraud. Very few, not in the hundreds of thousands, in the less than a few dozens, actually. And in all the cases I've heard of, the fraud was in favor of voting for Trump. Now, I'm not naive. I'm not crazy. I realize that there must be some percentage of people out there trying to, vote in a way that's not in adherence to the rules we're supposed to follow. It would be ridiculous and silly and naive to deny that, but it is equally, I think, ridiculous and naive to just dismiss the fact that since the election, in the states in question, bipartisan commissions of volunteers, which categorically can't be accused of being deep state actors because they're local community volunteers from both parties, have conducted recounts and failed to declare massive fraud. Yes, some instances were found, some weird, questionable things were identified, but in terms of massive, massive fraud that can be clearly laid out. Now the counter-argument is, of course, that somehow the Democrats, which, insert weird caveat, are not technically in control because Donald Trump is secretly president, brackets on that really bizarre and convoluted caveat, but somehow the Democrats managed to steal the election from Trump, despite the fact that he was a very powerful president that was in control and aware of everything, and is secretly still in control. I'm not defending the Democrats, by the way. But we have already survived 100 days of Biden in office. We aren't all Chinese communists suddenly. We haven't suddenly become Venezuela. And while there's plenty of new interesting things that the right is accusing the left of, there's plenty of crazy things that the left is accusing the right of. And in the middle of all that noise, there's plenty of us still standing around going, hey, isn't it fascinating how it appears that the left and the right, that the grievances of the left and the right seem to lockstep like puzzle pieces? All the fighting from the left and the right seems too snugly lockstep like puzzle pieces. And instead of winning, both sides contribute to a larger image. It's quite wild. But I digress. So many fascinating things have been going on, right? Ultimately, for those of you who are wondering, I do, and I've never denied this, I do technically disagree less with the platform of the political party as known as the Democratic Party. Generally speaking, I disagree with it a lot less. Now, I'm talking about the platform, right? The things that they state they want to achieve. If you compare platform to platform, there's just, I mean, even if I was to eliminate the craziest elements of each side's platform, generally speaking, I still have it. I find it very, very difficult to agree with the right. Now, once you work back in all the crazy things, then I really can't agree with either side in a blind faith, totalitarian, absolute way. But then again, I generally don't give my blind faith to any one or anything. In my opinion, and this is one of those things that people who love the idea of blind faith kind of don't want to contend with. But in my opinion, based on a lifetime's worth of observation, blind faith in something, a person, an ideological construct, a political party, that blind faith in its action, in the way it functions, in how it works, metacognitively, psychologically, spiritually, it blocks us from clear, direct communion with reality. Now, all kinds of arguments can be made about what ideology is most righteous and what conceptual construct is the most accurate and what political party is the most virtuous. And that's all interesting and can be very entertaining. And ultimately, some of those questions need to be answered, right? But let's zoom out, man. Always zoom out as far as you can. And when you get to that point, realize you can probably zoom out further. And then zoom deep, deep down, past the surface, inside. So when we zoom out, I see that there are larger issues at hand, and blind faith is one of the tools, one of the building blocks, one of the many bars in the gilded cage that keeps us, prevents us, denies our natural, organic, God-given right to commune directly with nature, with reality, with the cosmos itself, with one another as individuals, and with each other as members in a spiritual collective. Now, we can keep busy arguing about which constructs, which bars of the gilded cage are most righteous and pretty and closest to the truth, but we're still clinging to the bars of the gilded cage, friends. The thing that dissolves that cage, the things that liberate us from that cage, do not require blind faith belief. They call us to do spiritual work. If we want to free ourselves and each other, we must transcend our attachments to ideological constructs. Having said that, dear friends, let's hand things over to our ever stoic, ever silent, and yet ever entertaining sidekick DJ Zed for a little digital ditty entitled Basics Revisited, a drum and bass remix live track. Huzzah, friends! Just gonna tease the track, because despite totally failing to deliver a animatronic robot dance party last month, for that I feel truly, truly horrible, I will attempt, or as Yoda says, there is no try, only do, right? So I will compensate by hopefully dropping 2 of those animatronic robot dance party episodes in the coming 4 or 5 weeks. So hang tight. More of that to come. All right, friends. I wanted to point out a few more interesting, fascinating Trumptopian topics and then transition to a larger worldview. Some of you out there may have heard about this fantastic sounding 4th recount of the Arizona ballots from the 2020 election. So 3 recounts by bipartisan local volunteers was not enough, because all of those well-intentioned Arizonians, I think that's what they call themselves. Are they Arizonans or Arizonians? What do people from Connecticut call themselves? Because wow, that's a weird one to conjugate. I digress. That's an old joke. Never mind. It's rude, actually, because I realized where that goes. I just remember I haven't thought of that in years. But isn't it funny how we conjugate words in fascinating ways? I digress. 3 recounts by local Arizona citizens was too suspicious for the GOP leadership and those idolatrously attached to Trump. Did I conjugate idolatry correctly? I hope so. Those who are attached politically to Trump in the act of idolatry, which is fascinating, right? Because Trump, according to many in his base, is literally the second coming of Jesus. And it fascinates me that the second coming of Jesus is going to immediately establish a cult of personality that demands personal blind faith to one individual, which is exactly what idolatry is. The irony. So instead of trusting the local bipartisan citizenships of the great state of Arizona, that sentence got wonky in the middle. But instead of trusting those individuals there, because clearly everybody in Arizona is a deep state operative or something, the GOP hired a ridiculously underqualified cyber company with the delicious title of Cyber Ninjas, which generates all kinds of imagery, to do a recount, despite the fact that that organization has 0 experience or certification or qualifications in electoral procedures. That's fine. Never mind. Because, outsiders and disruptors deserve your blind faith more than insiders and politicians do. Because outsiders and disruptors never have an agenda? Yeah, I can't subscribe to that nonsense. Never mind that from the get-go, they were in really clear and obvious violations of the bipartisan protocols put in place that seem fair and reasonable towards, ensuring election security. They are now, as they continue to fail, just utterly fail in proving their point, they are now doing something extra ridiculous. They are And I'm not making this up. I watched an official involved with the recount, in the recount space, being interviewed by one of their exclusively selected news outlets that they think are unbiased and whatnot, towards Trump. He explained this to them, not to CNN, not to one of the evil anti-Trump conglomerates, but to one of the pro-Trump media outlets. They are, and you'll forgive me if I crack up laughing in the middle of this, they are literally claiming to be searching for and testing every single individual ballot to determine if any of the paper is made from bamboo. Because, wait for it, an ultra-exclusive, top-secret gang of Chinese spies managed to, without anyone noticing, import and secretly implant into the process hundreds of thousands of fake ballots manufactured in China. And obviously, China can only make paper from bamboo. Wow. I'm no great admirer of communist anybody, but I think a country like China should get a little bit more credit. I think they might have invented paper or something like that, and I think that they're fully capable of making paper without any bamboo in it, if they chose to. Regardless, as they search for that, they continue to do really weird, questionable things, like carry blue ink pens into the secure area, which is explicitly forbidden by the bipartisan rules because blue pens can be used to fuck with the results as you rescan the ballots. But that's okay, right? It's okay that they're breaking those rules because rule breakers get shit done, like marking ballots with blue ink so that they scan with new results. They've also been reported that they're just leaving the ballots unattended, and this is all being reported by the news agencies that they've exclusively allowed into their secure space, which is, profoundly ironic. I digress. Hashtag bamboo ballots. Also, bamboo ballots, the new fictional name for DJ Zed and I's, how do you make that correct? How do you conjugate that correctly? For the fictional band that DJ Zed and I are forming. Bamboo Ballots, debuting their first album next year. All right, friends. No, I'm kidding. We're not going to start a band because musicians often refuse to work with us because we are not trained musicians. Regardless, we love playing for you the crazy electronic noise that we make. And having talked about the bamboo ballots thing, and not remembering where I wanted to transition next, I guess we'll drop another track for now. Thanks for supporting this show. As you listen to this track, please be advised, there's some old episodes sprinkled throughout the 4.5, almost 5 years of podcast episodes, which have just music in them. And I'm going to go through, that's going to be, as I finally get around to doing the big revision project for the entire podcast show, that's going to be the first stop. I'm going to revise all those music-only episodes because I didn't know what I was doing and I was just experimenting. And I realize now I can do way better with those episodes. So tune in for that. Should start dropping. Wait, what day is it today? It's Wednesday. So I got to reset. And Monday is my new reset for all the big multi-week, multi-month projects I'm working on. So starting next week, you can look forward to those things kind of beginning to show up. Regardless, I humbly invite you to check out episodes from throughout the timeline of this podcast, because there's all kinds of weird stuff in them all. As you may or not notice, I don't always stick exactly to the title that I set out to discuss. But I digress. I think we're about to play some music, right, DJ Zed? Here's a little... I just did that. We should talk about more things. What's another thing? Well, we're on GM... Yes, you're right, DJ Zed. I should put a little bit more in this block, and then we'll drop that track. Hypocrisy. It's everywhere. But holy cow, has the grand old party really tried to outdo everyone in this department. Most notably, good old Mitch McConnell. Where's that blurb? I wrote a thing so that I could get the wording right. Here we go. Boom. Mitch McConnell openly declares himself, quote, the Grim Reaper, close quote, destroyer of all DNC legislation. Again, for the second time. The first time was back when Obama was in office. Which reminds me, isn't it delightfully silly how Trump supporters really, really whine and complain about all the, quote, hate that's thrown at Trump, and yet they spent 8 years blind with rage at Obama? And I especially appreciate those Republicans who truly, genuinely were not caught up in all of that during the Obama years. But their argument is still really flawed when they want to call the Democrats nothing but hate mongers against Trump. Not that both men are virtuous and free of critical flaws that we must analyze. They're not, right? I will not blindfaithfully adulate and adore any politician. Full stop. I will acknowledge when I agree with them, even if I don't want to support them. And that's where I'm at. Because I'm convinced that politics is a distraction from civic activity or work. And what the world needs is more civic activity to achieve the goals we want to achieve, to provide a better standard of living for everyone, not just certain special people. But back to Mitch McConnell. It's amazing that he's bookended himself with these kinds of claims. Obama years, he declares himself a professional agent of obstruction with pride. Okay? During the Trump years, he bitched and moaned irrationally, accusing the DNC of being obsessed with obstructionism. Now, did the DNC try to prevent the things that Trump was doing? Sure. Of course they did. Isn't that what the two mutually opposed, diametrically opposite parties are supposed to do? We get sold this aspirational notion that the two parties will keep each other in check, and therefore the greater good will be properly served. But my 40 plus years of observing politics has led me to conclude that that is a fallacy, arguably a completely distractionary notion that keeps us from acknowledging and dealing with the fact that the two echo chambers fit snugly together, hand in glove. Hashtag 2 wings, 1 bird. All right, friends, time for that bit of music I teased you about earlier. Boppin' Beach Bounce, a tropical pop remix live track. Take it away, DJ Zed. Digging that tropical pop vibe, DJ Zed. We're going to fade you out as you keep working the end of that song because our audience will be able to enjoy its fullness on the next animatronic robot dance party episode. That's right, folks. DJ Zed and I are also going to be stepping up our efforts, experimenting with a new array of noise-making applications, so stay tuned for that. Slowly but surely, new schedules and new gimmicks will be worked in, as promised. Right. So we're talking about zooming out, and we're talking about the curious problem of how here in America / Trumptopia, all the echo chambers, despite the fact that they claim to be fighting each other, because only X echo chamber is virtuous and true, and the rest of them, A through Z, are evil and corrupt and categorically wrong, and yet every single one of them have that axiom at the center, right? So, confusing. How do we solve that? Well, I'm telling you what, fighting about these issues hasn't solved anything yet. Don't take my word for it. Just take a quick glance over the last 5,000 years of bloody, violent fucking history, where we've killed each other over some of these same core essential issues, and have yet to find a solution through that mutual butchering. Gee, could it be that perhaps organized murder for profit, otherwise known as war, doesn't do dick to solve the problems that we create for ourselves? How do we transcend those boundaries? How do we get past that problem? Dare I be so bold as to suggest that we need to zoom out and change our perspective? As complicated, as crazy, as horrific as many of the problems that we face seem to be, there's a deep realization available to us all. And that's that despite the brutality, despite the horror, despite the craziness, most of the problems that we face as individuals and as a species collective are in reality spiritual problems. Problems related to our spirit or soul and the vast range of difficult to perceive phenomena that exists and operates at a spiritual dimension, right? Butchering each other in organized war for profit campaigns will categorically never address these deep-rooted spiritual traumas. In fact, conflict and anger and hate and violence and war, they only contribute to the spiritual damage. The calling is to heal that spiritual damage, right? And how can we heal that spiritual damage if we're caught up fighting each other on the surface of things and we're not supporting one another in the challenging journey of turning inwards to address our individual aspects that need healing, right? We have been fooled into perceiving the problems that we created for ourselves as character flaw problems. I'll say that again. I want you to really let it just sink in and contemplate it. Don't blindly agree with it. It is my humble observation that as a species, we have been manipulated into perceiving most of the problems that we deal with as character flaw problems instead of spiritual trauma and disease. The manifestations of spiritual trauma and disease, right? Let's take poverty for an example. Most people, especially people caught up in the echo chamber of fighting for the virtuous political ideology, they either don't don't perceive spirituality as originating in spiritual terms. I'm sorry, I butchered that sentence. I ruined that sentence. They don't perceive poverty as originating in spiritual terminology or from spiritual dimensions. So even those who fight against the vilification of the poor still contend with the struggle of how to evaluate those who are in poverty, right? I mean, clearly there's a spectrum of experience there, but how many people judge the poor as lazy, ineffectual, etc., etc., etc.? All these derogatory terminology. And yes, there's a bigger occurrence. There's a much more rabid, overt example of that over there on the right. But the left is not free of this issue. It's just deeper, more, what's the word? More sublimated and more intrinsically kind of part of the systematic flaws of where we think we're fighting for equality, but really we're just supporting politicians that talk about fighting for equality while engaging in the status quo. Arguably, it can be said that the primary obstacle, right, that we have contended with in the past is our own inability to disambiguate those two broad categories. Character flaw issues or, material problems, things of the material plane and things of the spiritual plane. We are constantly conditioned to attack people for having character flaw problems instead of healing people who have deep spiritual problems. And we, at the core of all of that distractionary agenda is to distract us from our own healing. How can we change the world if we deny or ignore or neglect or assume that we don't have any healing work to do deep within ourselves? Now, in some circles, the results of this conditioning are painfully obvious. Here in Trumptopia, people have the luxury of arguing and spewing hate speech at each other as they, quote, debate the various convoluted conspiracy theories about, whatever. Let's take the Rona, for example. Not only are they bickering about which conspiracy theory is most righteous and true, but through that argumentation, they foment hate, which of course we all know leads to violence eventually, and they are manipulated into radically ignoring the healing that is to be that we are called to attend to, right? The healing that is necessary, and they, by being caught up in this debate, this ideological argumentation, people tend to neglect, ignore, dismiss the suffering of others instead of attending to whatever spiritual work they can be doing that contributes to the healing of others. Now, I'm not trying to paint absolutist broad brush strokes about everyone. I'm saying these are trend lines that are clear, and that the vast majority of people bound up inside of those constructs generally don't address. Are they internally aware of them? Perhaps. Can I make a determination about that from my observation standpoint? Not really. Not until they start taking action to transcend their own belief boundaries, right? Inherent in all this arguing about conspiracy theory, about political party, about this ideological construct versus that ideological construct, inherent in all of that is this negation, this denial that we have any power to heal ourselves and each other. And there's this manipulation into people fighting with one another over ideas of how to be the most righteous label. As I posted out quite a long time ago, Americans fighting and hating their fellow Americans over ideological constructs about how to be an American seems to be at the core of the entire socio-political, ideological culture here in America. How does that help us solve the problems that we face in America? I don't know. But not everyone. A vast plurality of people are rabid at the mouth and willing to invest and double down in their luxury to fight and argue and spew hate instead of actually transcending the echo chambers that divide us so that we can heal ourselves and each other. So, to further that point, the same thing is happening in spiritual communities, right? Never ever have I been foolish enough to claim that in a broad totalitarian absolutist brush that any and all spiritual idea is better than everything else, right? That would be ideological infighting. That would be ideological clinging. No. There is the same problem, quite evident, in spiritual culture as there is in political culture. And that's that we get guided, we get misguided, we get our attention drawn towards the surface of things, right? I mean, there are spiritual people fighting with each other and spewing spiritualized, candy-coated hate speech about which spiritual ideological construct is most righteous, and judging everybody else as an idiot, a sheeple, etc., 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 patting themselves on the back for being woke or enlightened, etc., 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 and yet having no idea, what the Merkaba is or how to activate it. But I already did that episode, right? But recently, it hit me in a sort of profound way that my entire life, I've seen this expressed, this problem, this central encroachment into the public discourse in spiritual communities, just like I see in other communities. One example which is so popular that it's really difficult to talk to spiritual people about is the use of the term warriors. Now, I get it. Historically, culturally, there was a common use of the word warrior in a spiritualized way, right? Especially from antiquity, from when we lived in the age of tribalism, of true, actual tribal organization. But think about those contexts, right? Like we lived in constant conflict. We lived in constant threat from other people. And we still do, right? It's not like we don't. We've just, quote, civilized it all. But there's a really deep, powerful issue that I just can't get past with the use of that term. Warriors are what? They are pawns in the act of war. And the act of war is what? Organized murder for material profit. Now, I totally understand the concept that is trending, that there is a spiritual, quote, war going on, and that we are being attacked with, quote, spiritual warfare tactics. But let me tell you, dear friends, while that may be true, all of that spiritual warfare includes the ego trap of believing the only response is to become a warrior. I say to my spiritual friends who are caught up in this identity label that we should, not because I say so, but because divinity lines up this way, in my humble opinion. And anyone can observe this with clear enough faculties Divinity has no need for war, spiritual or material. So, what is divinity calling us to do? There's a lot of people out there that are caught up in a notion that stems from when empire was the church, that we have to, that this spirituality has to conquer all the other ideological constructs. But that's empirical thinking. That's empire building type thinking, right? I humbly propose, dear friends, that we must replace the word warrior with the word healer. Yes, I get why spiritual warrior kind of makes sense. And also, the calling, as to the best of my ability to discern it, from divinity is to heal. We overcome the spiritual war that's being waged against us through healing, not by indulging in spiritual warfare. I get it. Because of the mundane material envelope that we are trapped in, we are conditioned through generations upon generations of conflict to prioritize defense. I've been asked this directly from spiritual people. How can we ever heal ourselves if we never conquer the evil bad guys that are attacking us? How can we ever heal ourselves if we don't win the fight against the evil people that are damaging us? How can we ever heal ourselves if we do not destroy our oppressors? And it sounds like, those are very convincing questions, because the answer is not provided. Healing, in and of itself, will solve the issue. If we heal ourselves and each other, we heal the entire human species. And in healing the entire human species, we will heal all those that we identify as the bad guys. Because that healing process will purge the human collective of the ego traps that seduce us as individuals into committing acts of quote-unquote sin. That's why Jesus spoke about forgiveness. That's why Jesus prayed on the cross for God to forgive humanity. Because forgiveness heals. And to anyone having the conditioned knee-jerk reaction that some people don't deserve forgiveness, who do you think programmed that into society? Those who would oppress us by distracting us from the spiritual power of forgiveness and healing. Because they profit when we are incapable of understanding that to heal, we must forgive ourselves and each other. Forgiveness is not the idiotic acceptance of transgression, but the transmutation of the cause through healing. Next time you hear someone talking about spiritual warfare, ask them how much healing practice they are engaging in. 9 times out of 10, they admit to themselves and you that they're like, oh shit, you're right, I'm not paying attention to that. If they're truly working on aligning themselves with spirit, not regurgitating spiritual ideological construct. Oh, there's another thought that connects right here, and I don't know if I can find the note. Is this it? That's for another day. What was I thinking about? What was that thought? Not that one. Aha, here it is. This is the one I was thinking of. As it kind of just flows from whatever I was just saying before. And I'm reading from a note that I wrote to myself, I don't know how many days ago, but here goes. It is one thing to realize that humanity needs to liberate itself from the system of oppression that we created, because who created it? Humanity? And, we can't separate those things. We can blame aliens and demons and Satan, but until those things can be identified, brought forth, extradited, and held accountable in a court of law, we maybe need to stop looking for scapegoats and start taking account of ourselves, right? It's one thing to realize that humanity must liberate itself from the system of oppression that it created, but it is an entirely different thing to be caught up in the distractionary ego trap, or traps, plural, of pointing fingers, judging others, laying blame, labeling others as evil, and fighting with each other over which ideological construct is most righteous. Because these are all distractions. You are either busy healing yourself and the entire human species, or you're busy distracting yourself from that profoundly important spiritual calling. Now, people will accuse me of judging others in saying that, but how am I judging? I'm saying, hey friends, this is the ego trap. Why do I know that's an ego trap? Because I've dealt with it, I've fallen for it, and I've ruined things in my life, and then did what anyone can do. Come to an understanding, confront oneself about it, contend with the ego trap, and transcend it. Now, again, I'm not claiming to be free of ego or to be free of ego traps. Please take note of the many, many, many disclaimers I've made about the things I have not claimed to be, and yet have been accused of having made such claims. What I do think I understand after a lifetime of observation, and which I will continue to test as I have a lifetime of observation ahead of me, is this critical discernment. Because it's not a judgment, it's a discernment. Those are different activities. Anyone caught up in judgment is someone who does not understand how to discern, or is willingly choosing to ignore that tool and pick up the other one. But I digress. The journey here is not about winning. The journey here is not about conquering evil. The journey here is not about destroying our ego. The journey here is about healing in the broadest, most all-inclusive, most multidimensional, most abstract, and most profound meaning of that word. And if that statement is wrong, then fuck it all, I'm crazy, and I'll just stay in isolation for the rest of my life. But I have yet to find any convincing argument that proves that healing is not the spiritual calling. No organized religion has been able to convince me that healing is a lie or fake or bad. Please take note that there are many sources of that kind of programming. Healing is dismissed. Why do you think we burned all the witches back during the witch burning days? Because they were healers. Why was Jesus crucified? Because he was a healer. Why was Buddha run out of his country? Because he was a healer. The system doesn't want us to heal, because as soon as we start doing that, we build momentum. How do you pronounce that? We build a momentum towards a tipping point in which the system can no longer profiteer on us as individuals or a collective. So, dear friends, as always, I thank you for tuning in, and I humbly invite you not to take my words on blind faith, but to go deep within and seek for yourself. And every time you hit that wall of anxiety, boredom, and lack of, quote, anything happening while you sit there and meditating, Remember, you're not alone. Others have been through that before. And that is an invitation to double down. Those obstacles are an invitation to double down on your spiritual healing meditation practice. I'm going to stop rambling at you folks. Until next time, I have been your eccentric, radical, raw, totally unscripted podcast host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo, here with my stoic and silent sidekick, DJ Zed. And instead of an outro, I'm going to play a song in its entirety for your listening pleasure. Keep up and keep moving. A dubstep rave groove pad track by DJ Zed. Namaste, friends and family. May peace, love, and grooviness blossom in your heart. Please keep sharing the show, telling your friends and family about it, and keep downloading. And bring your comments, thoughts, questions, suggestions to the Almost Daily Zencast Facebook page, or better yet, Spreaker.com/show/Zencast. Tune in for new episodes dropping all this week, and the revised episodes from the past that should, hopefully, if I don't screw this up, start dropping later next week. When you have those moments where you blank on a step in your sort of flow, and you missed something, but you can't quite remember what it is that I missed. It just hit me while I was playing that bit of dubstep there. Earlier, I started describing how here in Trumptopia, people have the luxury of arguing and fighting and hating each other over, conspiracy content about the pandemic. Meanwhile, in other countries, such as India, from which I have this massive growing audience, apparently, and hello and namaste to you, my dear friends out there in India, while Americans argue and fight over the conspiracy theory content, a growing, epically huge tragedy of mismanagement and government incompetence seems to be playing out in India. And of course, here in America, what's going on? There are people, making desperate pleas for America to help our fellow human beings suffering from the lack of medical supplies in India. And there are those sitting in their entitlement and luxury of ideological programming, insisting that all claims of people suffering from India are fake news. Of course, how many of those people claiming it's fake news have bothered to reach out to actual people in India and ask them about it, I wonder. And given that, dear friends, so many of you listening to this podcast are indeed residents of India, I humbly encourage you to come on down to my social media and share your thoughts with me here on the podcast so that I can share with them, those who, I can share with the audience here in the United States, your first eye hand witness accounts. Now, of course, arguably there's a flaw there, right? Like, anybody can create a Facebook account and anybody can place it from being anywhere. So there's that issue, but I digress. What was the point of bringing that up and extending the show? While I personally don't currently have the resources to, fly over to India and verify these concerns for myself, comma, why did I say the word comma out loud? Sorry. That's from when I narrate things at the voice to text thing, and sometimes that crops up. While I don't have the resources to go there, I do very curiously have a massive growing audience in India. So, first of all, dear friends out there, my deepest and most sincere prayers that if this is real, because, I technically can't confirm or verify, but I'm going to presume that a percentage of what's being reported is indeed actually going on there. And to that, I want you to know my heart goes out to you. Your nation and your people have been in my thoughts and prayers from the moment this kind of news started trickling in, which happened actually, quite curiously, just days after I stated on the show in a recent episode that I rarely see news from India. And of course, admittedly, I very passively monitor the news. I don't go digging things up. I want to see what the news is bringing to people's attention. Obviously, neither of the many news agencies are perfect, but I also don't blindly believe that they're all evil, massive conspiracies. It's some ridiculous mix of something in the middle of those two extremes. But there are many of us over here praying for you, our fellow human beings over in India. And so my condolences to anyone and everyone who's lost family members recently due to the crazy-sounding shortage of fundamental medical supplies and the shortage of staffing. And as gut-wrenching and as hard as it is, I humbly invite you to share with us on this show your experiences. And if, I'm going to guess that there are people in every country that are convinced that and somehow have the capacity to deny everything that's going on. But the very simple reality that sort of denialist thinking leads to the denial of real, undeniable suffering the happening directly in front of folks. As evidenced by, police brutality. Because that's what that is. It is a denial by the, quote, bad apple cops of the suffering they are causing those that they are mistreating and abusing with the, quote, power given to them, bestowed upon them by the state. But that's a whole nother episode. And there's always way too much to talk about. So forgive me, friends, for making this episode longer than the project. I thought I was going to be on track for a nice 45-minute long episode, and here we are almost at an hour. But I digress. As always, friends, whether you're in India or anywhere else on Mother Earth, my heart goes out to you. My prayers go out to you. My love goes out to you. My compassion goes out to you. These qualities are not as limited as some of the fear-mongering would have us believe. And while, yes, we must attend to our own needs and prioritize them, we are also fully capable of caring for others and contributing to the healing of others. We must, of course, find balance. So if you're listening in India right now, please know that while there are many people here in Drumtopia denying your suffering, there are many more of us who realize that suffering around the world is real. Not knowing what else to say, I'm going to thank you humbly for listening throughout all this madness, for it has been a challenging few years. And I will humbly invite you to, of course, continue listening to the best of your ability. Anyone anywhere confronted with impossible contexts and odds should prioritize whatever self-care they need to be attending to over my podcast, of course. But if you're capable of tuning in on a regular basis, I am deeply grateful for that. Until next time, friends, please know that even if we never meet, I will always broadcast love to you. And please also know, if we have met and we didn't hit it off so well, I'm still broadcasting love at you. I try to incorporate the broadcasting of spiritual, unconditional love to everyone on the planet as part of my daily spiritual practice. Is that some smug virtue signaling? I don't know. On the note of virtue signaling, the most beautiful example of just how full circle the echo chamber goes. There's a new Facebook profile portrait frame that uses the marked safe from template to spell out that they are marked safe from using Facebook frames for virtue signaling, which is in and of itself a form of virtue signaling. Ah, the madness. Okay, friends, I'm going to wrap it up. Peace out. May you find that internal source of hope, peace, and strength that is within you, because it is within you, friends.